Atari Lynx 1989. The Atari Lynx looked like the future when it dropped in 1989. It was the world's first color handheld with a backlit LCD, and it could even be flipped to work for left-handed players. Atari was aiming to blow the Game Boy out of the water. But then, the problem started. The Lynx was huge and heavy, making it awkward to carry compared to the pocket-sized Game Boy. It also ate through 6 AA batteries in just 3 to 4 hours, while the Game Boy lasted 10 to 15 hours on only 4. Price was another killer. At $189, it was way more expensive than Nintendo's option. Even though it had some fun games like California Games and Blue Lightning, developers didn't fully back it. The Game Boy's simple design, longer battery life, and a little game called Tetris sealed the Lynx's fate. Atari had tech on its side, but the handheld world isn't just about power. Sega Game Gear, 1990. If Atari stumbled, Sega thought it could do better. The Sega Game Gear came with a color screen, a solid library of ports from the Master System, and a slick design. On paper, it was everything the Game Boy wasn't. But Sega's handheld suffered from the same major issue as the Lynx: battery life. 6 AA batteries only gave you about 3 to 5 hours of playtime, compared to the Game Boy's marathon sessions. The system was also heavier, bulkier, and more fragile. While it did sell millions, it never caught Nintendo. The Game Gear relied heavily on watered-down versions of console hits like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it lacked unique must-play titles. Sega marketed it hard, but by the mid-90s, Nintendo had completely dominated the market. The Game Gear wasn't a complete failure, but it definitely didn't live up to its launch hype. Neo Geo Pocket Color, 1999. SNK's Neo Geo Pocket Color had some great ideas. It had a bright screen, strong battery life, and one of the best handheld control sticks ever made, a small, clicky joystick that fighting game fans loved. The console also had standout games like SNK vs. Capcom, Match of the Millennium, and King of Fighters R2. Hardcore gamers adored it, but the timing was brutal. Just as it was finding its footing, Nintendo dropped the Game Boy Advance, and the Neo Geo Pocket Color didn't stand a chance. Add to that weak third-party support and poor marketing in North America, and it quickly faded into obscurity. Today, collectors look back on it fondly, but back in 1999, its launch was more of a stumble than a stride. WonderSwan, 1999. The WonderSwan, designed by Game Boy creator Gunpei Yokoi after leaving Nintendo, was actually a clever handheld for its time. It was affordable, compact, and had impressive battery life, up to 40 hours on a single AA battery. But the problem was software support. While it had hits like Final Fantasy remakes and some Bandai anime tie-ins, the WonderSwan was only officially released in Japan. This meant it never had the global reach of Nintendo's handhelds. The Game Boy Advance steamrolled over it in the international market. And without strong third-party backing, the WonderSwan never expanded beyond Japan. It wasn't a disaster locally, but globally, its launch is remembered as a missed opportunity. Nokia N-Gage, 2003. The Nokia N-Gage is frequently cited as one of the most unsuccessful handheld devices ever produced. In hindsight, it seems like a brilliant idea for Nokia to combine a game console with a mobile phone. However, the execution had a lot to be desired. The N-Gage had an unusual taco form, and in order to switch out games, you had to remove the battery as well as the rear cover. Holding the phone sideways against your head in order to make a phone call was an awkward experience. The launch included titles like as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and Tomb Raider, although the majority of them were simplified adaptations of console successes. With its cumbersome design, exorbitant price, and lackluster marketing, the N-Gage failed to sell more than 3 million copies globally. Although the idea of a phone-console hybrid was innovative, the launch was so disastrous that it has become the subject of ridicule in the history of gaming. Gizmondo, 2004. The Gizmondo made the N-Gage look respectable, even if the N-Gage was not a very good gaming console. The Gizmondo, which was marketed by a disreputable company with connections to criminal activity, made promises of GPS, multimedia capabilities, and sophisticated 3D graphics. However, things were in a state of complete confusion in actuality. It had a lousy collection of games, the hardware was unreliable, and there was absolutely no marketing. Rather than truly establishing a gaming brand, the corporation responsible for it wasted money on extravagant automobiles and extravagant parties. It is one of the least successful handheld consoles ever released, with sales totaling fewer than 25,000 copies around the world. To make matters even worse, the company declared bankruptcy, and one of its executives is infamous for crashing a Ferrari Enzo while attempting to escape from the incident. The incompetence and avarice that were rampant during the debut of the Gizmondo are the main reasons for its failure, not bad luck. PlayStation Vita, 2011. On the surface, it appeared as though Sony's PlayStation Vita had all of the advantages necessary for success. The screen OLED was stunning. It had 2 analog sticks, touchscreen controls, and console-quality games that could be played on the go. It was supposed to reign supreme according to the fans. However, the Vita stumbled as a result of proprietary memory cards, which were ridiculously expensive, sometimes costing as much as whole games. Sony was also unable to offer a sufficient number of first-party titles that were highly successful. The game catalog became swiftly depleted, despite the fact that it contained treasures such as Persona 4 Golden and Uncharted, Golden Abyss. At the same time, the casual audience was drawn away by the explosive growth of mobile gaming on smartphones. Sony reoriented its priorities toward the PlayStation 4, which left Vita enthusiasts feeling let down. The launch of the Vita made promises that it could never hope to keep, making it one of the most disappointing handheld gaming systems of its generation, despite the fact that it has a small but devoted fanbase today. Sega Nomad, 1995. The Sega Nomad was a handheld version of the Sega Genesis. On the surface, that sounds incredible. Full Genesis games, playable on the go. And technically, it worked. You could plug in your Genesis cartridges and take them anywhere. But the Nomad was bulky, drained 6 AA batteries in just a couple of hours, and was ridiculously expensive. Unlike Nintendo's handhelds, it didn't have original portable games designed for quick play. Instead, you were just replaying home console games on a tiny, power-hungry screen. The Nomad never got much support from Sega itself, which was already juggling too many hardware projects at the time. As a result, the Nomad quietly disappeared from store shelves, remembered only as a curiosity for Sega diehards. And there you have it, 8 handheld console launches that promised big but crashed hard. From the bulky Atari Lynx to the disastrous Gizmondo, each one teaches the same lesson. In handheld gaming, it's not just about flashy features or raw power. Battery life, price, marketing, and a strong game library matter just as much, and sometimes even more. Some of these consoles have found love years later with collectors and hardcore fans, but at launch, they simply couldn't stand against Nintendo's iron grip on the portable market.